Okay, so welcome to traditional versus conscious parenting. We're going to be looking at how to heal from emotional triggers. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions. I'm not sure. We'll see how the time goes. 45 minutes is really, really quick. So let me just start by just getting a sense of what comes to your mind when you hear the word conscious parenting. What comes to your mind when you're conscious parenting? Yes?
I think responding rather than reacting.
Yes, responding rather than reacting. What else comes to your mind?
Really paying attention.
Really paying attention, for sure. Anything else? What else comes to your mind when you hear the word conscious parenting?
It's thoughtful.
Thoughtful parenting, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would,
Yeah?
Intentional.
Intentional. Did you want to add to that?
no, that's okay.
Okay. I'm just going to turn this off for the purposes of the video here. So I can wait. I think I have to turn this on. Okay, so when we hear the word conscious parenting, we think of responding, we think of being in the present. What other thoughts come to your mind? Yes?
Awareness.
Awareness. Any other thoughts?
Self-reflection.
Self-reflection. Okay. So we have some ideas about what we think consciousness means or conscious parenting means. So how is that different than we're parenting right now? Or how we have been parenting traditionally for many, many decades, actually? Yes?
But it's not necessarily about like what the kids are doing. It's more about how you're reacting, like how you interact with your children, not like, oh, they're bad, they're doing this thing.
Okay. So would that be a conscious parenting thing, or would that be a sort of a traditional parenting? Oh, what is that, do you think?
That's the traditional, that's like the, they're bad, you know, how do I break this like negative behavior?
Okay. So often in traditional parenting, we're trying to fix the child.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Anything else we do right now that we might be wanting to have some help with or change a little bit, or that we have been doing for a long time in parenting practices? What comes to your mind? Punishing? Punishing. Absolutely. What else? Criticizing, yes. What else? Think about something that you think maybe as a parent, you're doing it on a regular basis. You might not really like that you're doing it. You might want to change it, but it kind of has been something that's been going on for a long time, yes.
I get exactly what things that have been just going on for a long time, have been on their own path.
Right. Okay, so just kind of repeating things that have been, maybe happened to you in your childhood or how your parents parented you. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just kind of not having an open mind to kind of a different reaction.
Okay, so kind of just being a little bit less open to, or maybe conditioned to not opening up to new practices or new ideas. For sure. Anybody in here busy? Busy at all? Some people are busy? Anybody here distracted at times? A little bit. Maybe phones, computers, those things we see once in a while. Yeah, so sometimes what happens is we are so busy and so distracted and really kind of not conscious about what we're doing with our children that often, not purposefully, we show up to our children in ways that really kind of, where we're putting a lot of external demands on them. Where we're so busy doing that we don't really have a lot of time to be. So instead, we're saying things to our kids like, have you done your homework yet? Have you made your bed yet? Have you called your sister for dinner yet? Have you cleaned the bathroom yet? Or whatever the case may be, depending on how old our child is. So what happens is when we place these external demands on our children, our children very quickly get the idea that this is how they get connection with their parents. That if they somehow meet these demands, then they will connect somehow with their parents. The challenge with this, of course, is that children need love and approval in their lives, and they need connection. So children will go to the ends of the earth. In fact, they'll squelch away the very essence of who they are in order to meet those demands, those external demands. So let me give you an example. Let's say that Johnny's a 7-year-old boy, and Johnny in his natural state has an affinity towards piano music. He loves piano music, he listens to it in his room all of the time. And at 7, he bangs around the piano at home, and at 7 he comes to his parents and he says, "Can I take piano lessons?" And his parents, who are pretty happy that he's asking if he can take music lessons, says, "Well, Johnny will let you take music lessons, but Dad, who's been really conditioned in a family where it's kind of a male thing to play the guitar, or doesn't really think that the piano is really a boy thing to do, says, we'll let you take music lessons if you take the guitar." And so what happens to Johnny is that Johnny has to then take that natural affinity he has in his true self and kind of repress it or separate it from his true self in order to please his dad. So another example, let's take a female, Annie. She's 8 years old, and Annie really likes connecting with other people. She really likes socializing. She's joyful, she's happy when she socializes with other people, with other friends. And so she spends about 50% of her time socializing and about the other 50% of her time doing schoolwork. As such, she gets B's and C's in school. She's pretty good, she's happy with that. But her parents come from a tradition of really valuing school and valuing getting high marks at school. So they say to Annie, "Annie, we really need you to get some A's. So we've arranged for you to stay in at recess with your teacher a few days a week and after school, and we need you to do a little bit more homework when you get home after school." So Annie does exactly what Johnny does, represses that need to be with her friends in order to meet the love and approval of her parents and their desire to have her get good grades. Now, the interesting thing that happens with this process is that as our children try to meet these external demands, when they do have to repress those parts of themselves, what they actually start doing is creating a gap between their true self and their whole natural state and start to create another self, which we know today as the personality, that gets that love and approval from their parents. And so what that happens is they learn very quickly that in order to get love and approval, they need to meet the external demands of their parents, their teachers, their peers, their bosses, their lovers, and eventually themselves. So they learn very early on that their sense of worth really depends on their ability to do this. So what do you think happens in the case of a child who is trying to meet those demands from their parents but just can't? Their parents don't validate even when they try, and it's just kind of they try and try and try, and they just really don't get that validation from their parents that they're doing a good job. What do you think happens to those children?
They end up with the "I'm not worthy" thing that you were talking about in the keynote.
Yes, they end up with that, I just don't measure up, I am just not worthy enough. And so what's the behavior that we might see from those children? I know you know this.
Looking for external validation.
Looking for external validation, how?
Acting out.
Acting out, absolutely, acting out. And so all acting out is a need to connect with a parent. So if your child is acting out, or you see a child acting out, really it's about how is it that they're not connecting with their parent? What as a parent can I be doing to connect with my child? Because I might not actually realize I'm not connecting with my child. So children will do whatever it takes, even if it means acting out, to get that connection. And you might recognize this process in your own life, because as traditional parenting goes, when we place these external measures on our children, then they start to measure their self-worth based on those things. And as they do that, they have to keep doing that. Because there really actually is, there's some chairs over there actually, if you just want to, as they have to keep doing that, it's a never-ending process. Because they will never actually end up being able to be completely validated. So what happens is this gap between their true self and their personality self can get wider if that continues to be the case. And then as an adult, what that feels like is kind of a sense of emptiness, or a sense of loneliness, or a sense of not knowing who you are, or kind of like something's missing, like there's a void. I'm probably imagining that everybody in the audience right now feels that to some degree. And the reason that you feel that way is because we didn't really think about that when we were parenting back in the day. We just kept unconditionally passing along those values and those belief systems that this is what you do to get that approval. So what do you think might be different? I'm just going to grab a marker here. What do you think might be different in conscious parenting around this concept of external measurement being the indicator of self-worth? What might be different around the external? Generally speaking, we're going to have some opposites going on here, just to help you out. I heard it? Internal, right. So what we strive for in conscious parenting is internal validation. So when we're practicing this philosophy of conscious parenting, we already come to the parenting practice with the idea that our children already come with their own emotional guidance system, with their own sense of what they desire and they don't desire, with their own sense of what might be a good thing to do and not a good thing to do. So when we recognize this in our children, instead of placing values on them or trying to mold them into something that society wants them to be, instead we extract what they already have. So we look at them as already perfect as they are, already in their whole state. And we try to pull out that positivity or those positive values within them. So let me give you an example. Let's say Michael comes down every morning. Michael's 5. He grabs the wall and jumps down 2 stairs at a time. I don't know if any of your children have ever done that. Not very common. And he does this, and as soon as he gets downstairs, if Dad sees that, Dad might say, Michael, quit putting your hands on the walls, and you're going to fall one of these days jumping down 2 or 3 steps at a time. What we might do in conscious parenting is look at what are the positive qualities here, and say, Michael, I love that you come downstairs full of life every day. I love that you're so motivated every morning to take on the world, and I love that you always have a smile on your face in the morning. So we extract those things that build up Michael's already internal guidance system. And we allow Michael to feel good just as he is. So we don't try to mold him or change him into something that we were taught as kids, because that's really why we do it. So when we think of conscious parenting, we think of trying to build the child from the inside out. So instead of putting those measures on the child, we try to create the environment or the home base or wherever we're bringing up our child that helps this thrive and grow, so that our child doesn't have to look for external validation because they already feel validated within themselves. So when we think of traditional parenting, we often put ourselves in the role of the authoritarian. So we're the person in power, we're kind of up here and our child's down here. And when we do that, we really look at our children as something that we own or possess, and sometimes that we even control. And it really sets us up for a mindset of, I'm the parent, so I'm right. I'm the parent, so I know best. I'm the parent, so I have to teach you. I'm the parent, so I have to fix you, right? Because I know better. So when we kind of get into that mindset, we take ourselves out of the equation as parents. We're focused on our child and what our child needs to do and know to be able to be part of this society. So often when we do this, we want to look at our children as miniatures of us. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I played soccer, so you should play soccer. Or, I took music lessons, so you should take music lessons. And we get this idea that we should try to make our children into these miniature replications of us. And we don't sometimes stop to think that they already came into this world with their own agenda, with their own life path, with their own evolutionary purpose. Because what purpose would it serve to have miniatures of us running around in the next generation? So when we look at this particular concept from a conscious parenting perspective, what do you think we might be doing over here that's different than looking at us as the person in charge? A little bit more tricky.
I want to use the term equity, but that's so loose. I mean, allowing them to have a little more of a voice, if you will.
Yes, absolutely, you're on the right page with that, yes.
Like a guide,
Like a
helping
guide.
them find their own way.
Yes, a little bit of both. Influence would be a better word, for sure. A little bit of both. So in conscious parenting, this is conscious parenting, by the way. We see our child as a partner. We see our child as a partner in our lives, so we don't see ourselves as that authoritarian in our life. And the way we do this is we allow our child to mirror or reflect back to us those parts of ourselves that we had to repress and separate from ourselves in our childhood. And we use our child as that spiritual partner in our life to show us that. And the way we do that is we pay attention to when we're emotionally triggered by our children, when we want to really react. Because when we're emotionally triggered by our children, it means that there's one of those parts that our child is demonstrating so beautifully for us that we weren't allowed to express as children. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that Julie is 5 years old, and Julie is talking back to her mom, what we might consider talking back. And her mom feels this emotional trigger, like, stop, that's so disrespectful. Go to your room, or whatever the mom might say. And the reason the mom's doing this is because the mom is recognizing that as a child, she was never allowed to talk back to her parents. And if she did, she would actually miss dinner, or she would be physically punished, or she would be grounded. So the instantaneous reaction is to do what was done to her. And we cannot see that in ourselves without our children reflecting that back. So in conscious parenting, we look at our child as that reflection to say, hey, if I'm having this emotional reaction, it means there's something within me that I didn't get to express as a child. And in doing that, we allow our child to help us to integrate and heal those parts of ourselves that still need to be loved and healed. So tricky, we have to do that because the way we have to do that is we have to recognize that emotional trigger. And once we do that, we're there. Because we might say to ourselves, okay, I recognize that. I was never allowed to talk back to my parent. Or we might not even make that connection. It doesn't even matter. As long as we recognize, what is my child's behavior triggering in me right now? As opposed to, how can I stop my child who's being a brat? Okay, so there's a huge difference there. We're now putting the spotlight on the parents and not on the child. So the way we might do that is recognize that, okay, I'm having this emotional trigger. And so how I'm going to deal with this instead is to not fix, run, avoid all of the things we've been doing for 5, 10, 20, 30, some of us 40 years. But I'm going to sit through. I'm going to sit with. I'm going to stay connected to my child. Because really that's all the child needs is that connection. They're not looking for you to fix it. They're not looking for you to reject them and go away. They're looking for We need to accept that part of them as well. So we want to accept all parts of our children the way we wanted all parts of ourselves accepted, but maybe didn't happen. Most likely didn't happen. So not only does it help the child realize that even when I'm this way, my mom or my dad, could be my dad, still love me. There's not that need to separate that part of themselves and repress it. And it allows the parent in turn to sit with that discomfort and start to allow that expression for themselves as well. To sit through and realize it's okay. It's okay. I can bring this part of myself back home.
So then how do you deal with that situation? Because that's exactly what happens with my son and myself. He's almost 11, and he'll be talking back and being disrespectful. And if I had ever talked to my dad like that, I wouldn't have seen next week, you know?
Yes.
And so I get what you're saying about recognizing that's an emotional trigger for me.
Yes.
But then how do I deal with that with my son? Because I can't have him talking to me the way that he is, you know, and using the words that he is. So how do I discipline that? How do I?
Okay, why not? Why can't you let him do that?
Well, because I have to teach him that he can't talk to people that way in life, you know, that that's not an appropriate way of expressing his anger or frustration or using the words or language that he might use.
Okay. So that's a very good question, and I'm sure everybody else can relate to that. So this is going to probably be, they need that open mind concept, right? So this is probably going to be a bit different, is we're going to sit there with it anyway, because who says? Who says our child can't talk like that? What we're going to find that's really interesting is that when we sit through it, our child stops doing it. So when we sit through it and we accept it, child goes away fine. Child probably might not even do it again or might do it again. And when we demonstrate that we don't get triggered by these things, our child learns from that demonstration. And so our child doesn't have the need to talk back because the child is doing that because the child's not being heard. So you might hear that, you never listen to me. All you do is yell at me. And so if that's the case, that was a bit dramatic, but if that's the case, it's probably true. Because when we are whole, you know, and when we show up with our children in our whole state as calmly as we can and as grounded as we can, our child has no reason to act out. So we really have to get past our own idea that we are that person in charge and really let that ego come down a little bit and say, okay, well, wait a minute. You know, I wasn't really listening, or what could I be doing? I know we're going to have a whole bunch of questions, and I might reserve them to the end. I'll take one more just so we can get through this material. Yes?
My question is sort of a spin on that as well, that I would love for my children to be partners, and I get that emotionally, but at the same time, I have to get them out the door to school, right? Like at a certain time, I have to be a boss, because otherwise they're going to be late for school, they're going to be late for work, like the whole thing cascades down.
Yes.
Right? Like I'm happy to have partners, but at the same time, I do need to be the boss sometimes.
Okay, so there's a difference between, and we can maybe, when we do questions at the end, there's a difference between, because often people get the idea when you hear this philosophy, where are the rules? Where's the discipline? Where's the punishment? We're used to that. So it doesn't mean there aren't rules. And it just means that the rules aren't punishing or rejecting the child. So if there's a rule that we're out of the house at this certain day, well, you can still talk to me while I have you over my shoulder going in the car. I'm still listening. Or I'll tell you if I don't have time right now, but then I'll show up for you in the car. So there's rules, but that's different than punishment. Punishment is like a rejection of a part of somebody. So I like this part of you, but I don't like that part. Like I love it when you come down smiling and jumping downstairs, but I really don't like it when you talk back to me. That part can go. I don't want that part. I don't want to deal with it. I don't have time to deal with it. All that kind of stuff. So really it's really getting into practicing and recognizing and seeing kind of the magic of the behavior dwindling down when the mommy or the daddy show up present. Because really that really is all your child wants. It's hard to wrap your head around that, but it's really all your child wants is that connection. Once that connection's there, that safety's there, that security's there, there isn't that need to be kind of talking back or swearing at the parents or things like that. So we'll get into that with some questions, just so we can get through. I want you to be able to go away with a fairly good understanding and then I can take questions. I can also give you some resources for this at the end as well. In traditional parenting, we focus on this content means behavior. We focus on the content, we focus on the behavior. So we look at what is the child doing? Is this okay or not okay? Which was beautifully demonstrated in the question today. So when we look at the behavior, we judge it, we criticize it. It's a natural human thing. We've been brought up to do. We're just not that evolved not to do it. So when we focus on the behavior, we generally do the punishing, criticizing thing, right? So what might be the opposite in conscious parenting? When we're focusing on the behavior, what might we be focusing on instead?
The cause?
The cause, which is kind of like the
process.
The needs of the child.
sort of, you're going around this, the intention. What is the intention behind this behavior? Okay, so let's say we have Mark and his daddy. Mark is 6. Daddy and Mark are walking down the sidewalk in summertime downtown. It's fairly busy. There's a few teenagers sitting up against a brick wall. And as they're walking by, Mark's dad feels Mark's hand leave his. He turns around and Mark is kicking as hard as he can one of the teenager's legs. Now the first thing, if Mark comes from a family where that would be horrifying or horrific, Mark's dad would yank Mark over and say, "What are you doing? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't bring him up to hit people or kick people." So what would happen, I don't know if that's the best example, but what would happen is that automatically, as soon as we're emotionally triggered, we'll start to react to the behavior always. Always we'll start to react to the behavior. We don't do that in our house. What are you doing? Why are you hurting those boys? So if we go to the intention, if we pull Mark aside and say, "Mark, what is making you kick those boys?" And Mark says, "I heard them laughing and one of them stuck their foot out and was going to trip you on the sidewalk and I thought you were going to fall down and hit your head on the cement and then you were going to die and I was going to lose you forever." Bit dramatic again. Now we've got the intention, right? Which has nothing to do with what we thought in the behavior. And now we have something we can extract from our child. So now we have something we can validate. I love that you're really protective of me. I love that you care so much about me that you don't want me to get hurt. And I'm wondering, if that were to happen again, is there another way you could tell Dad without kicking somebody or hurting somebody? So once we validate that internal intention, think about that for a minute, as maybe kind of cliche as that example was. What happens to the child in this situation if we were to validate the intention as opposed to criticize behavior? Yes?
They're more open to the idea of change.
Yes.
Because they don't have their backup from being criticized.
Yes. Well, I could just yell at you. Watch out, those teenagers are trying to trick you. Sounds like a great idea. So they're more open to problem solving because they're not shut down, right? They're not like yelled at and criticized and shamed. So what else might be better for the child in this situation? Or anything that you recognize in this situation that the child might walk away with?
Well, discussing like a different tool, obviously they're frustrated, they're upset, thinking that something will happen to their dad, and so he needs to learn a tool to help deal with that frustration that isn't going to hurt somebody else.
Yes, problem solving. So asking your child, letting your child figure it out. So also feeling okay about themselves, right? Not kind of going into that repression and putting their head down, walking away, and not inducing that shame in them. That we don't really think we're doing this stuff. We're not here because we're malicious parents. We're actually here because we're very thoughtful and loving parents. Well, but when we're not conscious, we don't really think down the road about things like that. We don't really think, because it's just the way it was for us. So it just seems so natural. We don't think about it, you just react, right? Is there a hand on this? Yes?
I think they're more likely to come to us with their problems if we treat them that way versus, "Oh, Mom might get mad at me if I bring this up." That's just not responding.
Yes, absolutely.
That's key.
Great point, because what are we doing? We're staying connected. We're not disconnecting with that shaming process. Okay, so in traditional parenting, life is generally about us. You know, we forget that our children have a life too, and they have their own agenda. And so, you know, it could look like our teenager comes in, just puts his book bag down, and we go, okay, go upstairs, get your brother, we're having dinner at 5, then I've got a meeting at 7, then we've got to get you to your hockey practice. And it's kind of like all about what's going on with the parent, because when we look at ourselves in that authoritarian role, you're supposed to respond to my life, right? What's going on with me is important, not what's going on with you. You have to conform to my agenda. So we often don't ask our children what's going on for them. So in that example, maybe our teenager comes home, he's got his iPod in his ear, you hear a particular song he's listening to, you ask him how his day was, what kind of music that is, what he likes about that, what kind of bands he's into, things like that, and really keeping that connection going. So I'm kind of a firm believer that there is no rebellious teenage phase. The rebellious teenage phase is the fact that the teenager no longer feels they can engage with you. So if a teenager comes home and the first thing the teenager gets is, why are you doing that? Did you do your homework? There's that disconnect, right? So it's like, okay, I just want to go to my room. So the only reason a teenager is rebelling is because the teenager isn't connecting with their parent. As soon as you start to connect with your teenager and ask them about their life and not judge them and sit with them, they will connect again with you. And you'll see a whole different side to their behavior. So life isn't just about us, but life is about them as well. Getting harder to write at the bottom. Okay. So I just need to check the time, because there's not a clock in here. Oh, I know we're supposed to. So you have 15 minutes, yes?
Our life does rotate around, in a lot of cases.
Our
Like
life-
you were saying, when you get home and you've got that 5 o'clock dinner on the table,
Yes.
7 o'clock is hockey, that's their hockey, not yours.
Yes, I could have been more mindful of my example.
So I'm just saying, yeah, it's hard to, they're very egocentric at that age as well,
Yes,
at 13 to 18, 19.
yes,
And that's very difficult to deal with too as a parent.
yes, yes.
And if they're not getting academics or something done, then yes, the natural consequences they fail. But at the same token, as a parent, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see your children fail.
Yes.
So how do you get them to get that through the earlier?
So that, again, is a good question. And so when we're talking about connecting, asking them about their life, it doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't have something going on like an activity, but just that we take the time. So when they come in the door, we take the time to ask them about themselves. Or we take moments to ask them about themselves instead of telling them what's going on with us all the time. And so in terms of the question, how do we get them to focus on things, I think, other than themselves, like academics and things
Yeah,
like that?
and engage with us too, because a
Yes.
lot of the times they're on their technology, they're not engaging with you. They walk through the door, you
Yes.
walk home, they're in the bedroom, or they're in front of the idiot box, and there's just not that connect.
Yeah, so you do have to build that in. So you have to, in a lot of cases, when you're talking about technology specific, is just to be able to say, you know what, our family is really important too. So what time can you figure out tonight that we're gonna spend this time together? And let them figure that out. You really do have to make the time. It's a great question, because technology consumes a lot of our children. And it's a disconnect again, right? And sometimes you can actually watch them play certain games and ask them about the characters, and you'll see them open right up. Because you are connecting into their world. And that's really what we're talking about with this. So we don't really have to think so much A, B, C strategies. When we get this within ourselves, we will see our children transform. You have to sort of try it to know. It's hard to hear the philosophy and go, wow, that just sounds like, but it does, because that's really, if we know what that underlying reason is, or that underlying need is that connection. When we get that, then that's what we have to focus on. How do I stay connected in this situation? Well, maybe I have to watch Mario Kart. Maybe I have to play Mario Kart. You know? But how do I do that? Maybe we have to carve out time. We go for a walk for half an hour in between gaming sessions or what have you. But we just need to stay connected. Try to keep it simple in that respect. Even if you asked yourself that one question, how can I stay connected in this situation? You would be 90% there. So let's talk about the last couple things here, and then maybe we have some time for questions. Reactivity. We know that's a traditional parenting style because it happened to us. We just aren't that evolved. We don't have unconditional love. We have moments of unconditional love. But we have conditional love because that's the society in the world we grew up. So we have this reactivity because it happened to us, and we have a lot of emotional triggers because of it that we have stored up that we don't even know about. So let's say another kind of similar example to the one where the child talks back to the parent. Let's say we have a mom, or in this case, let's say a dad. Let's say we have a dad who was never allowed to show their emotion in their family. You don't cry, you don't show emotion, that's weak, it's for babies. And in this house, we don't show emotion. So just suck it up and move on. So let's say in this case, this dad, 5-year-old, is sobbing, just wailing in front of him. And it's so anxiety provoking for him because A, he doesn't know what to do with it. He's not allowed to express emotions. He never has been allowed to express emotions. So he's really frustrated, like I just don't know what to, and the volcano starts, like just stop it right now, like I can't take this. Or, you know, I want to run away, the fight or flight that's ingrained in us when we get emotionally triggered. So the dad might be ready to erupt, but if he can recognize, okay, I'm emotionally triggered, what is my child's behavior triggering in me right now? I was never allowed to have emotion. I wasn't allowed to show emotion. I certainly wasn't allowed to sob and cry. Now, whether you get that piece or not isn't that important. You probably will. But if you don't, as long as you know this is triggering me, that's the big thing, because we want to catch that trigger, right? And I think you've heard a little bit of this already today, but the reason we want to catch that trigger is because then we can hit the stop button. So we can go, okay, I'm about to erupt, and then take that step back. So it's almost like taking a step outside of yourself, almost as if you were looking at a version of yourself, and you kind of step outside. And just watch for a minute. Take a deep breath if you need to. Count to 3, count to 10. 3 if it's too long, 10 if it isn't. But you want to take that step outside and go, okay. So how do I want to respond right now to my child in a way that I'm going to feel better about myself? And they're going to automatically feel better, right? Because when we get that about ourselves. So we want to recognize the emotional trigger, step back, watch. Then we're not part of it anymore. You see, that just disconnects us from the experience. And ask ourselves, how do I want to respond in this moment that I'll walk away feeling better about myself as a parent? And then you can choose your response. So your response might be, in conscious parenting, what's very, very different when we come from that perspective is we don't try to fix, change, or make happy faces and make it go away. We just sit with it. We just sit there. So maybe we're going to go up and just hold our child. If our child's really volatile and pushes us away, maybe we can't do that, but maybe we're just going to sit with our child. But what we're not going to do is fight, flight, or flee. Because those are the things we've been doing, practicing all our life. So it forces us to sit with that emotion that's difficult for us. And again, to try to bring those parts of ourselves back home. So in conscious parenting, we want to respond. We don't want to react. Because when we respond, we know we're present. But when we react, we're really just reacting from reams and reams of unconditioned kind of thoughts and belief patterns that have just been happening over and over again. So we want to respond instead of react. In traditional parenting, we feel disempowered. Why? We might not know we feel disempowered, but if you've ever had the thought, I'll be a better mommy tomorrow, I'll be a better daddy, like just give me a couple of, like let me sit down and read the paper and then I'll be a better daddy. Or I'll be a better mommy, you know, when I've had time to myself, or whatever the case may be. If you've had that thought, that's a disempowering thought. So what about traditional parenting makes us feel disempowered? Yes?
You feel like you need to take control, so you're always fighting to try and control things, which is not that control.
Yes. So you're always fighting for the need for control, right? And are you in control? Have you ever had a fight with a 2-year-old? Who's in control? Yeah, you're not in control. It's a facade that you're in control. Because if you were in control, what would you be doing?
You wouldn't be like, "Rah," you would be calm, you would be centered, you would have control of yourself, not.
Yeah, you would have control of yourself. And that's what we talked about, that responding. Standing in your own power and your own personal power, and not erupting and giving that away. Because you know how you feel when you do that, you react and you think, I'm not really upset with my child, I'm upset with me because I yelled and I screamed and, or whatever you did, or I went and locked myself in a room, or, yes.
Do you have any tips for, like, okay, so I know to step back and be able to respond instead of react to the situation.
Yes.
I've got young kids.
Yes.
So they don't understand mommy needs a timeout.
Yes.
And they follow me, right? So then I end up reacting because, like, I can't get that 10-second break to calm down and give the right information back out.
Right.
So do you have any tips on how to kind of be able to get that break in your mind?
Yes. It's just that, so how small?
4 years old or 9-month-old twins.
Okay, it's just so first I would try to do it with them. I would try to step outside and say, okay, just give mommy a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're
Because
tugging
the
at you and they're
situation,
tugging at you, and if you can't do that in the moment, is finding a place where you can go and you tell them you're coming back though. Because children will often feel abandoned about that. They'll think, okay, mommy doesn't like this part of myself, so mommy's gonna leave. So you wanna say, mommy's just gonna take a step over here and then I'm gonna come back. Or mommy's just gonna go upstairs and I'll be right back. So if you had a playpen, if they're really little, you put them in or something like that. But just whatever you can do to get that time. I mean, even if they're tugging on you, what you're gonna find is if you really do put this into practice, you'll be able to let them tug on you and still be present. But it won't happen at the beginning. It takes, I think somebody said it today. I'm not sure who said it today. Somebody said today, when you practice enough, it becomes, you get a sense of groundedness that you don't have at the beginning when you practice. Like it's like a discipline. It's like when you meditate after a while, you get to that place of quiet really quickly. But at the beginning, woo, it's like I can't stop thinking for 30 seconds. So eventually you'd be able to just let them tug and you would be able to not respond. But you might have to just tell them, you're coming, you're going, and you're coming back. You're walking up the stairs. He was walking up a flight of stairs and coming back. Just maybe, but you have to tell your children you're coming back or they'll get the message that this part of me is not okay. Or mom or dad is abandoning you or leaving you. So how else are we disempowered in traditional parenting? I mean, we're talking for the most part, not everything we do is, but for the most part, yes.
Your result oriented, like, need that you have an expectation that this has to happen or it's not okay.
Yes. So there's an expectation, and when that expectation is met, it's not okay, things fall through. What would be an example of that? Every day.
Like they didn't go to bed when they were supposed to,
Yes.
and they said these things they weren't supposed to, and they
Right.
didn't eat this, and they think this. And
So sometimes we need to get rid of the belief system that they're supposed to. I mean, yes, we have to have rules. For sure we have to have rules or we have a bit of chaos. And we have to work with our children around problem solving with those rules. But sometimes we just have to let go of what you need to be doing this right now or else, because that's really what's causing the angst in the relationship. If your child is anxious, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's the most freeing thing to do too, because we don't recognize these things in ourselves. But when we do, it's okay. I mean, we were brought up this way. We didn't know any different. And it allows us to go on that magnificent journey with them, where they become this little being that's just showing you all of the things that are going to make your life better. How else does traditional parenting disempower us? Based on the concepts we talked about. So external measurements, authoritarianism, focusing on behavior. Yes?
Kind of losing your temper, losing your patience and yelling at them. I mean, that's one thing I am trying really hard to work on. My dad was a yeller, and I find that when I lose my patience, I yell at them, and then I hate myself for it later. You know, and I can see already in my son, he's trying, he tries to express himself that way too, and I want it to stop. And so, do you have any tips on controlling that reaction and yelling at them?
Yeah, because that's where you need to start. That was really insightful of you recognize it. You need to start with you so your son will stop. Yeah, and so again, it would be that stand back. Become the observer of you. Step out of you, because you've got all the beliefs that are making the reaction happen. Step outside and just say, okay, great. Look at how upset I'm getting. Oh my God, my blood pressure is way over the top. My heart is racing. I feel like I'm going to pop, and what's my child doing? Spilling juice on the floor. So when we can step outside of ourselves, we can see the picture more rationally and more realistically, because the reaction is coming from something much deeper rooted, that's been kind of building. So the eruption happens that doesn't necessarily match what the situation is. So that's what I would really recommend. It's very, very helpful when you get a handle on it. It really does work, and it's easy to do. So just stepping out of the experience and just watching yourself in any experience that triggers you.